All right, everybody, welcome to episode 3 of the Beef and Bitcoin podcast with your hosts, Brett and CH. Today we've got another quick episode. I can't believe these are going by so fast. We just got episode 1 and 2 out, and they are on YouTube. So go ahead and search Beef and Bitcoin podcast, and you will. That's probably the only thing that's going to come up, to be quite honest with you. Quick shout out to a couple of other really good podcasts that you should check out if you haven't already. Marty Bent, Tales from the Crypt podcast, Stefan Livera, the Stefan Livera podcast, Noted podcast with Pierre Rochard and Bitstein, Bottom Shelf BTC, and of course Peter McCormick with What Bitcoin Did. I'd like to thank everybody for presenting us with topics to talk about for this episode. You know, we've been putting those questions out to you on Instagram for you to let us know what topics you want us to cover, and that's been really helpful for us to get our notes together for, you know, the coming episodes. So we appreciate that. All right, so let's jump right in, man. How you doing this weekend?
I'm doing good. Crypto again dropped to new lows. I have the Bitcoin chart open. For people who don't look at like trading view charts or more technical charts, I have that open. It's recording on the screen. But while we were setting up the podcast, I noticed something on State of the D apps, which should be on your screen now, and that storage users in the past 24 hours is up 234%. I don't know why. I couldn't tell you, because last time, usually when I check this site, it's pretty sad to see all the D apps and their usage. It's pretty low, but
Yeah, it's typically less users than the number of people that are employed by Consensus,
yeah.
which
It says 72K daily active users now, which I don't know where that came, because it wasn't that high a while ago.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot, but you know, I'd hate to talk shit on something that I don't really know about, but I do like doing it. All right, so a couple of topics here that were presented. The first one, let's jump right in, is adoption, more specifically around what kind of software will we need to move into the future? How does Bitcoin get adopted via software? What do you think?
That's a good question. Obviously, the biggest thing I find with software technology, whatever it is user interface, user experience is the biggest thing. UI, UX. If you can make a good thing that's like, what's the best way to put it? It's, you know, intuitive, and that's exactly when you think about Steve Jobs and what he did with the iPhone, the iPad. It's super intuitive, and there was a thing, Steve Jobs, before he died, they were talking about the iPad, the first gen. They took it to some third world country in Southeast Asia, and this kid was playing Angry Birds with it. And he's never seen technology like this in his life, and was able to shoot birds just by using his finger. And why? Because it was intuitive. So here again, you know, as Bitcoin scales, as we, you know, whether it's wallets, you know, interfaces for sending coins, etc., as they get more intuitive and as it becomes easier for people to use, like, I think we're gonna laugh one day at the fact that you had to, you know, copy and paste address codes. I think that's something that maybe, I don't know how long down the line, because like early email, you had to know how to code to send emails, and now you just simply type in an address and it goes. So I think we're gonna get to a certain point where it'll be much easier for people to send money, you know, via Bitcoin than it is now.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I remember the days of getting on the internet, you know, with getting onto AOL
Dial up.
and moving the dial up, yeah, and plugging the, you know, the phone line into the router and all that stuff. It was a nightmare. I remember downloading a song, and it took like 3 hours, and it was that, to me, that was the fastest thing ever. You know, that was extreme. Yeah, it was it was crazy fast. But that's a good point. I think that, you know, we don't think about how difficult it was sending an email 30 years ago, and now how easy it is. You can do it just from your phone. And I think that we need both it needs to be easier to both acquire Bitcoin and to use it and send it back and forth between from point A to point B. And if anybody out there hasn't downloaded the Cash app yet, that might be a good app to both buy Bitcoin, but also to see what a great user experience looks like. I can't imagine it being any easier to manage a digital wallet than with something like the Cash app. So I think we're going to see more things like that. I think good UX from the wallet side is going to be critical for adoption, because if just as easy as it is to use Cash App, or how easy it is to use Venmo, it really needs to be that easy
Yeah.
for Bitcoin, or else it's not going to work. It might be a great store of value. Paying with gold is not easy today, but people still store their wealth in it. It didn't need to solve that particular problem. So if we want to see that widespread adoption, the software just has to be a lot easier to use for Bitcoin.
Speaking of gold looks like it's breaking out here again. I just have the chart up. I'm not sharing my screen with you right now, am I?
No.
There you go. Yeah, gold bottomed out like 1160 back in August, and now it's breaking out. I think likely we'll see $1,300 gold here shortly. That seems like the next area of real resistance in the long run. So it'll be interesting to see with everything going on right now. In the macro. Like I know this is a little off topic here, but what we're seeing in Paris right now is a pretty big deal. There's a lot going on right now. Like or France in general. You have a whole country, reverting on its own leader. So
Yeah, and it's funny. I saw a picture of one of the French protesters wearing the yellow vests,
yeah,
and they had it said "Buy Bitcoin" on the back. And it's funny because that meme of just buying Bitcoin and Bitcoin sign guy, with the very famous picture with Janet Yellen, you're gonna, as these macro events come up, you're gonna see the same thing over and over again. That buy Bitcoin sign meme will just keep popping up over the next decade, and it'll only it won't be a rare sighting. I'll put it to you that way.
yeah. No, it's getting obviously it's catching more and more. Recently I looked at the Google Trends for Bitcoin, and they're upticking again. So more people are getting more interested, and whether that's because it's getting a lot cheaper, I don't know. Maybe people understand it's here to stay. It kind of, you see it more you hear it more. Like for CNBC now covers it daily. It's not a thing of the past. It's covered daily by CNBC. And I know we probably want to stay on track. Do you want to keep talking about the whole idea of what makes Bitcoin software easier and wide adoption?
Yeah, definitely. So another thing that I have here in my notes to talk about is, running full nodes. That's something that is typically only really for those who are more technically capable, or have maybe been in the space for a few years and are, want to take responsibility for running their own full node and managing their private keys, and maybe they want to experiment with Lightning. So it looks like you're starting to see some more of these node in a box, right? We have the Casa HODL node, which essentially, it's $300. It's a really nice looking product. It looks almost like an Apple product, and it just has a Raspberry Pi inside of it, a hard drive. It does a quick sync to the Bitcoin blockchain, allows you to run a Bitcoin full node, and also a Lightning node. So that's the fastest possible way you can get onto the Lightning network and start sending micro payments, sub-Satoshi payments, and start opening channels back and forth. But I really think that for to get back to that software adoption, it needs to be really easy to use. And I'd say this this node in a box from Casa is really straightforward, almost idiot proof. But I still think
proof.
Yeah, it's legit. I mean, it's a really nice piece of hardware, and I think that will be my next. That's what I'm really most excited about, is seeing the hardware side of Bitcoin start to come into the homes, right? So that people can get up and running and just start playing around with this technology. I mean, so a quick guy just saw some Lightning Network statistics recently. Looks like there's 4 different clients live. You have 17 different wallets to choose from. There's over 4,000 nodes on the network, almost 13,000 channels, and a Bitcoin capacity of about 454 BTC, which is right around $1.5 million USD value. And that's really exciting, especially in a bear market. So you can see that Lightning's just really doing a good job of helping Bitcoin to scale and answering some of those questions about, Bitcoin being a payment network. And that kind of leads you to the next logical question of, if you can start sending payments for a fraction of a penny and it settles in 4 seconds, what do we need some of these other altcoins for?
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Here again, I've seen the point made on Twitter numerous times. The thing that's going to win this whole space is the store of value. That's what will win it, not the transaction, whether it's medium exchange or the fastest transactions, because there already is that. Whether you have like Venmo, other payment systems, there's numerous payment systems fighting for fast transactions, but there isn't anyone fighting for that. Obviously, Bitcoin is, but that store of value, having a real hard store of value, something that's very hard to duplicate, whatever, something that someone can say, hey, I'm going to put this away for a decade and not have to worry about it. The same thing as someone buying a few pounds of gold, something ridiculous, saying, hey, I'm not going to have to worry about this. This will hold its value. And that's what I think we're seeing more and more over time right now, is the store of value use case, because everything right now is dumped in crypto, and we haven't seen any alts, no alts, maybe besides for Bitcoin SV, which I will pull up a chart of that, have really decoupled from Bitcoin. And when I mean decoupled, I don't think Bitcoin SV really has decoupled, but I shit you not, uh, every time Bitcoin SV or Bitcoin moves against it, it's moving against Bitcoin. So Bitcoin goes down, Bitcoin SV goes up. And I think if I remember correctly, Bitcoin SV is Craig Wright's Bitcoin.
I'm pretty sure.
I don't
Yeah, I
know which
mean,
one's which at this point. There's Bitcoin ABC or Bitcoin Cash ABC, and there's Bitcoin Cash SV. But if you've seen this SV chart, it's literally, it went up like 150% in the span of a week. From the 22nd to the 26th. And then even recently, Bitcoin started dumping again, and it went up another 100%. It's coming back to earth now, but it's just been hilarious because every time, like I even commented on one of Peter LeBrand's photos, and like the whole crypto market's tanking, and I posted a photo of this like going against everything else, but it's interesting.
yeah,
It's
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 a
probably
just
highly manipulated, and that probably explains why its price is going against everything. That's the only answer I could have for it, is like it's just probably really manipulated, but that's crypto for
right.
you.
Exactly. And there's just a ton of scams out there. It's really easy for a new person to come on to an exchange, see three or four different versions of Bitcoin, look for the cheapest one and say, well, this one looks good to me. So please don't do that. If that's you, do not do that. One other thing I wanted to mention regarding the Lightning Network was, and I put this in a video for episode 2 of the podcast, was taking a look at the Lightning Joule extension, and pretty much all that it is, it's really similar to MetaMask, where you have a built-in wallet browser extension, so you can move around to different websites that accept Lightning payments, like yalls.org or Satoshi's Place, and within 2 or 3 clicks, you are making a payment, whether it be a microtransaction, paying a couple Satoshis, a few cents to read an article on yalls.org, or, gambling on Lightning Spin. So the tech is coming. It's still really early. I don't see any of us, or our listeners for that matter, going and jumping in and getting a Lightning node up and running and using the Lightning Joule browser extension. But it is it's really exciting to see the Lightning Network start to mature. And I think, if we were to replay this episode in another year, we're going to have a lot more to talk about
Yeah.
with the growth and expansion of the network.
No, the hardware is definitely coming along, and I think it's coming along faster now than ever, as you get more people focusing on Bitcoin itself, just because people are hearing about it, or they understand it more now. It has more of a nuance to it. It's clearly made a bigger footprint than it did 4 years ago. It's everywhere.
For sure, for sure.
Um,
All right. You want to jump in, to stay on the topic of adoption. One of the other questions that was posed to us was, what does adoption look like as more regulation comes into Bitcoin? The ETF and other financial institutions jumping in. What do you think?
That's a good question. I saw again that I think it was the Van Eck ETF got pushed back. They're delaying it as long as possible to like mid-February. Yeah, I think it's SEC, or whatever. They're delaying it, the hearing on the ETF until February. So that's delayed again. No, but it's a big deal. And I think, if I remember correctly, Bach is settled in Bitcoin. Is that right? Or is it cash settled?
No, it's going to be physical Bitcoin settled. If
Yeah,
my,
yeah,
if,
physical.
if I can recall that correctly, which is important in my opinion. The more the cash settled, it worries me a
The
little bit.
futures, well,
If
the futures right now with CME and CBOE, they can, there's a big correlation between when futures end and the spiking in prices. It's kind of funny.
Exactly. And if anybody wants to take a deeper dive into the effects of Wall Street getting into Bitcoin, go and check out Caitlin Long. Check out anything that she's written on Twitter or any of her Medium posts. She's a Wall Street veteran, really knows what she's talking about. And her biggest fear with Wall Street getting into Bitcoin is, Wall Street wanting to rehypothecate Bitcoin, or basically creating fiat on top of Bitcoin, where there are many different parties have the same obligation to the same Bitcoin,
Hmm.
and that's not a good thing.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about Bitcoin is that it's fixed supply. And she mentioned that one of her Wall Street veteran friends had said that they need to fix Bitcoin. They need to fix that problem where the supply is limited. And that just really goes to show you the mindset of how Wall Street operates. And having multiple claims on the same Bitcoin is definitely something that they will look to do. And that's the only thing that scares me with Wall Street and Bitcoin. Other than that, I think in the short term it could suppress the price, but in the long term, it's definitely going to be definitely bullish.
Yeah, I think long term you can't, it's hard to argue not being bullish. It's just giving more people access to Bitcoin. So it's more dollars flowing at it, and especially when you look at older generations who, aren't as attuned. Like, even for me, like, as I said, like, I'm pretty tech savvy. It's still not easy to go sign up for an exchange, buy crypto. Like, Coinbase is the easiest way to do it by far, I think, in my opinion. If you're an American citizen, you just get on Coinbase and it's a few clicks, but still, it's not, doing anything outside of Coinbase. You're like, what the fuck? You know, you tell someone to go like hop on like Bittrex, they're gonna be lost. And Bittrex isn't even that bad. Their exchanges that are worse than that. Um, and so long-term impact, as I said, a lot more exposure. You have, people who maybe want to put part of their 401k, etc., the Roth IRA. And when you look at gold here, I had a chart pulled up with gold. Let me go back to gold on a monthly bar. So this is going to be pretty far zoom out here. Gold ETF got approved in the early 2000s, and gold is around 250, 260, whatever. As you can see, I think in a combination of having the global financial crisis and the gold ETF, it went up to about $1,900. I mean, so you're talking at almost 1,000% appreciation, which is quite impressive for an asset of that size. Um, in the span of what, 10 years maybe? And then
Hmm.
now and here again, people talk about, and we discuss this, and well, it's not even talk about, it's known now. Um, like, for instance, JP Morgan, other banks are manipulating currencies and metals, specifically precious metals like palladium, platinum, silver, gold, to their benefit, suppressing prices. Why? Because if you think about how much money's been printed off over the past decade alone, just between all the quantitative easing, between, Bank of Japan, the Federal Reserve, ECB, Swiss National Bank, Bank of England, China itself, countries and central banks have taken advantage of the free money, basically low interest rates and free money, or negative interest rates, even worse. And so what have they done? Suppress the metals, because there's no way the metals are, you're not getting that much gold out as the many dollars that have been printed over the past decade. Um, and I think we soon will see gold and other precious metals move hard, like move, to the upside, where they get valued properly, just because free market eventually takes over.
I kind of want to stick to that topic for a second. So,
Yeah.
and I've heard this talked about a lot on Twitter. What is the role of monetary metals such as gold or silver a decade from now? So let's make the assumption that Bitcoin is on its way to becoming sound global money. What role does gold and silver play in that future?
That's a very good question. There's a guy I think I mentioned before on the podcast. If you want to follow him on Twitter, Occupy Wisdom, he makes a great point. Even when you think about this past year in 2018, how many natural disasters there were in the U.S., whether you look at hurricanes, etc., wildfires, where people lose power, you still need to be able to transact. So when there's no power, how do you transact? Cash. Um, and I think in that same form, cash is still going to be cash. There still needs to be some kind of physical medium of exchange 10 years from now. We can't just go completely digital overnight. That's not possible. People won't, not everyone will be capable of going 100% digital. So there needs to be some kind of physical, medium of exchange. I don't know what it will be. Will it be coinage? Will it be dollars? But there needs to be something that, if I walk into a bar and I want to buy a drink, I give the bartender $5 worth of whatever that asset's backed in. Instead of using a card, instead of using like a Lightning Network, whatever is at the time. We're just speculating here. But you need to have some kind of physical thing because without it, you lose electricity. The whole money is what society runs on. Without money, society falls apart. You get the Dark Ages. Just look at the collapse of the Roman Empire, and then the Dark Ages that followed in Europe. It's not good. So you need to have some kind of physical form of money that people can still transact with. When they're buying goods and services, just needs to have that. What it is, I couldn't tell you. In a world of if we're in a world where Bitcoin say was the reserve currency or whatever in a decade from now, that's a very good question. I don't, it has to be some kind of coinage or some kind of notes, you know, and I would
Yeah, it's
assume they're
something,
backed by some kind of currency.
right? That's something that I've been thinking about more often, just because if you make the assumption that Bitcoin will become sound global money within the next couple of decades, I don't know, maybe 2040, 2050. Um, what's the role of monetary metals? Is there another form of cash that is used, or is there some sort of physical form of cash used via Bitcoin? And the only example I can think of right now for that is have you ever seen the open dime USB sticks to store Bitcoin? They're basically just it's a hard USB that has a protective cover on it. It basically locks the private key onto the USB itself, so you can't crack it. Unless you physically break open the device, break the seal, and get the private key. But somebody was talking about those could act as physical cash. Let's say you have, and this is where I start to go cosmic with it. To quote Marty Bent, is how far along in the future does that take for that to happen? So if you have 100 satoshis on an open dime, a USB stick, is that going to act like a $10 or $20 bill 30 years from now, where that's just being passed along? It doesn't need an on-chain transaction. I could hand you the USB stick in person. You could plug it into some sort of USB reader. You'd verify that there's 100 satoshis on it or 1,000 satoshis on it, and that's it. That's the end of the transaction. So that's a different type of second layer solution, because it allows you to pass along Bitcoin physically, right, from one person to another. I can hand you that stick, and you can verify it for yourself how many satoshis are on it, and then that's the end of the transaction. So I think I have no idea if it's going to play out that way, but I like what you're saying about that physical thing that still needs to be passed around, and I wonder if open dime or something similar doesn't we don't that I don't know. I'd be honest with you. I ordered a bunch of them for Christmas. I'm going to put some Satoshis on them, hand them out to people at Christmas time who are interested. And because they want something physical to hold. It doesn't
Yeah,
mean anything to them if I set up a wallet for them on Coinbase or the Cash App and I send them, 1,000 Satoshis. That doesn't mean
doesn't
anything.
mean
But,
shit.
maybe that physical device, something that they can hold in their hands. I don't know. It's it's going to be wild for sure.
Yeah, no, it's something that it always interests me because we're going through a very times like right now. There's a lot of change going on right now. When you look at the markets, the global macro turning over, as we mentioned earlier, what's going on in Paris and what's going on in Europe. It's not just Paris now. It's Brussels and Belgium. It's the Netherlands. It's Germany. You're seeing a lot go on. You're seeing a rise in populism. Um, You're seeing global markets turn over. What we're seeing is basically a decade of manipulation. And a good guy to also follow on Twitter, Paranoid Bull. He mentioned something about that's completely mispriced as political risk. Where are we seeing political risk? Right now, we're seeing France. Macron, President Macron in France now has a 23% approval rating. That means three-quarters of the country wants that guy out. I don't see that. The guy has a 5-year term. I don't think he's going to make it all 5 years. And I think also, I've made comments before, I don't know if it's on this podcast, but I don't see the EU being a thing in a decade. I see the EU disintegrating in the next decade. And it could disintegrate a lot faster than that, considering the times we live in with social media and internet and how quickly information spreads. I don't, what's going on in Paris right now isn't getting any better. You know, those people clearly are dissatisfied with their government. And I think, it's finally being priced in. I have a chart of the S&P 500 open right now. And here again, another bearish engulfing bar. It doesn't look good. If we break out of this kind of wedge pattern here, whatever, symmetrical, it should be a symmetrical triangle that finished all the way through. But if we break out to the downside, it's not going to be pretty. It'll be very violent. Between,
Yeah,
it's I've been watching this happen the past week, and the markets just took a shitter. So
yeah. I mean, it's absolutely wild. I think when I hear from people with their corporate 401ks and everything, they get nervous during these big down days. They're looking at it. They're watching their net worth um,
just
fluctuate,
vaporize. Yeah,
fluctuate.
That's literally the worst thing you can do when you're investing is just look at it. It's terrible. And I'm sure we can
Yeah,
speak to that when we were in crypto. And you're like, I didn't have a portfolio tracking app until December last year because I stayed away from it. Like I had the apps, but I didn't actually put my coins in them because I knew it wasn't healthy. And once you do it, once you put it in, it's not healthy, because you're just checking it and you're like, oh, I'm up, a few $1,000s this hour. It's like, and then you're like, well, fuck,
yeah,
I should have sold,
yep.
so it's not healthy to be looking at that shit. Um,
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I just read something last night. Somebody posted on Reddit. They had a wallet on their 27-inch iMac that had $170,000 worth of Bitcoin on it. And they took it to the Apple store. They needed to get work done or whatever, and the guy didn't have his private keys backed up on a piece of paper anywhere, and that's it. Like, it's gone. They
yeah,
reformatted the hard drive, and I mean, that's it.
that's a bummer.
They're
That is a
yeah, it
that
sucks.
is that is a big bummer.
It really sucks. So, and the reason why I bring that up is because I'm sure that was probably, I don't know, 80%, 90% of that person's total net worth.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean, that's a lot of money. And I'm assuming the guy was relatively young, not a
yeah,
50-year-old guy with $3 million in his Roth IRA.
yeah. No,
So it
that's
just goes to show you
detrimental.
that, yeah, you could buy a couple of thousand bucks worth of shit coins and catch a quick pump, and next thing you know, you're worth $500,000. Um, you're going to watch your net worth fluctuate violently over the next couple of decades. So if you're willing to do that, that's awesome. If you stick with hodling and watching the market collapse 80% every couple of years, you're gonna shave a few years off your life for sure, but
Yeah.
you're going to be much more resilient. I mean, I've probably gotten the most gray hairs in the last 9 months than I have, the prior 5 years, and it's really just from
Stress.
being into Bitcoin, from
Yeah.
stress, from
Oh,
looking at the
yeah.
markets, from seeing the volatility just eat people alive. And
Yeah,
one of my
no.
favorite things to look at is the capitulation threads of just watching people throw in the towel. Lost $5,000, lost $20,000,
Yeah.
even lost $500, and people are just capitulating. And it's funny. It's funny.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. It definitely doesn't help you, stress-wise, to be involved in any kind of financial markets or watching stuff like that. But it does help you understand what's going on because there's a lot of people that are unaware of the situation where one, U.S. markets are at, two, the global macro in terms of markets. Like I know we mentioned on podcast before, oil went from $78 now. I think it's at 50. Well, yeah, oil's at $52 now. So
That's wild.
yeah, no, it's absolutely wild where oil's at, and oil it might reverse. I don't think it will. I think we're gonna be looking at like 28, $25 oil in a few months, if not even sooner than that. Um, Oil's looking pretty weak right now, so that's something to keep in mind. Like, there's a lot going on, and if you're just not paying attention to it, like like the average American or the average person is completely oblivious to what's going on in the markets. But legacy markets have been absolutely insane this year, um, and it's definitely has effect on crypto. I don't think people are gonna pour more money into shitcoins. That whole narrative of people are gonna pour more money into shitcoins if
Right.
equities go down. I don't think that's gonna happen. I could be wrong. Here again, we're every altcoin is literally at the mercy of what Bitcoin does. You know, I'm surprised Ripple hasn't even capitulated more to, it's 25 cents. No, I'm serious. Like, just from looking at
Me
the
too.
charts, I'm surprised it's held 30 cents very well.
Me too. Yeah, I would have, as much as I don't really care for XRP and would like to see it continue to drop. I am a little surprised that it's
No,
held up.
I was
And
thinking for sure 25 cents it would break below that because everything else capitulated way below their former lows. And I think it's just because here again, it's a cheap coin and it's still, someone made a comment.
it gets attention, you know.
Dude, it gets attention. Someone made comments like, someone's like $589 XRP, and they're like, and someone's like, that's a ludicrous. And it's like, well, he's like, no, it's not when don't bet against the herd. And he's talking about like the 100 million retard holders. The people who are just religious. Like, there's a cult with that coin. If you see some of the tweets, there's a cult. It's
Yeah, the XRP army. Yeah, it's really tough. I don't engage with them too often. There are a bunch of followers that follow the Crypto Humor page who love XRP, and I love them just for following the page and giving me shit on a daily, weekly basis because it's a lot of fun to talk shit to each other. But
yeah.
I definitely can't wait for that to play out.
Dude,
And
if you're seeing the
yeah,
chart on my screen, it's pretty retarded. Like that was Ripple last year. Like, people don't understand. Like, crypto, like, for the most part, even if you were in 2017, if you didn't catch that initial, you know, April to May pump, or even
yeah,
before
you're
that,
down right now.
well,
If
you
not, if you
sat
didn't,
down most of the year, and we're just like waiting, and
yeah.
then one day it just went. It was like everything just went. And like there was this huge built up. You could feel it building up. There was no way,
Yeah.
no way to doubt it. Like, I could feel it building up. You were seeing crypto pop up more areas, but you weren't really seeing the prices yet. You're like, what the fuck? And then one day it just fucking went. Like when you're looking at that chart, it just went. Um, so
Yeah, it's insane. I can't believe the pump. I'll never forget that day, right around like January 4th or 5th, when Ripple was just at all time highs, and
it was
that
like
was
it was like
I mean,
three
it
dollars
just
and thirty cents. I was like looking at it, I'm like, huh.
it was absolutely wild because that was just, I think that day for me personally was peak
Portfolio.
euphoria,
Oh,
peak hype,
yeah.
like everything's about to get tokenized, and I would have considered myself a shitcoiner
Oh,
then
I was
at the time because
100%. I was
yeah,
loaded in shitcoins. I think everyone
yeah,
was.
and you see something moon like that in real time, and then you see how wild it can be, and
Yeah.
it's too funny. I have no doubt, and that's kind of something that I've been bouncing around. You will we see that the crazy alt season? Will we see more alt seasons? And if I had to guess, I'd say yeah. I'd
Oh,
say we're gonna see
I'd say we'd see another
two
alt
or
season.
yeah, we're gonna see maybe two, three more alt seasons. Might be a stretch because I'm also making the assumption that alt seasons will correlate with like a Bitcoin hype cycle, a blow off, something similar to a parabolic move that we saw similar to 2017. And I don't know how many more of those um, crazy adoption parabolic moves we have left in Bitcoin. I'd say we have a couple more, and I'm just not sure how many more of those will will an alt season come along with
Yeah.
the Bitcoin parabolic move? Because if you make the assumption that Bitcoin's going parabolic because people are adopting it as money, money's a zero sum game. For Bitcoin to win, other things have to lose.
Yeah.
So I don't see alts continuing to pump because if Bitcoin's pumping, people are starting to wise up. They're realizing, money works better as one thing. And you're going to see money start to flow to that. And I also think that the next alt season will not be the same alts that we have today. Maybe 2 or 3 of them will be the
Hmm.
same, but it's going to be a brand new set of shit coins. I've been telling a lot of the people who DM me asking about, oh, do you think this coin will pump on the next run up or this and that? Is like, well, if you look for a screenshot of coin market cap in 2013, 2014,
Yeah.
or 2015, you're going to see a group of 9 different coins on each one of those lists, with Bitcoin obviously being the one at the top that's been consistent throughout the whole thing. But that list changes, and it's going to keep changing. Your shitcoin of today will most likely not be around tomorrow. So that's something to keep in mind if you're still holding bags of anything.
Yeah. I'm still looking at the Ripple chart, and like the most obvious sell signal of all time is this just giant fucking doji. This just
Yeah.
giant ass doji. Like, and here again, like I told you, all that time I wasted looking at altcoin papers should have been in the technical analysis. It would have vastly benefited me then. And not just the TA, but the more TA risk management, all that stuff, that whole suite, would have vastly benefited me here versus all the altcoin papers. But it is what it
Oh,
is. You know, like I remember, like I was because I had one bag that got so big compared to everything else. I was like, oh well, until everything gets this size, I don't want to sell it. That's a bad mentality to have because everything else was up, over 1,500% or something like 2,000. Like it was the stupid
it's
game. Like the
insane.
gains
Yeah.
we were making were just not real, and that was the problem. When you have bags that do 30 plus x, it's hard to justify selling a 10x or a 15x, which is ridiculous. You know, um, but that's what happens. You get spoiled in crypto.
For
I saw
sure.
something mentioned about fucking Bitcoin targets, and I was gonna open up my Bitstamp chart again and just kind of zoom out. And
Yeah.
so yeah, right now, Jesus.
Before we talk about that, you mentioned ICO white papers, and somebody had submitted a question, and I do want to touch on it for 2 minutes. If there's any benefit to actually reading ICO white papers, shitcoin white papers, whatever. And I like that you said you'd rather have spent your time learning technical analysis, fundamental analysis, general economics.
Yeah,
So
seriously.
is there any value? I think it would be very easy for me to answer no. There's absolutely no value in reading any of these ICO white papers because they're not going to matter. But if I had to think of a pro, it would be you're getting a really good look at all the things that aren't going to work. And you're going to be able to start logically reasoning through why they don't work.
Hmm.
So if you're reading a paper on proof of some shitcoin that is using proof of stake, you can spend a couple hours reading the white paper, trying to understand their side of the story, and then you can go on Google or DM me. There's a million links that I have about why proof of stake won't work, and then you can start to reason through why proof of stake isn't going to work relative to proof of work. So
I,
that's
I,
the only positive I can see, is that you're just
yeah,
going to be able to go through and figure out what's not working.
yeah, that'd be about it. I'd say, and you might learn a few technical terms that are somewhat useful, but that might be it. I think.
Right.
If you're looking at my screen right now, like
I
look
am.
how
Yeah.
retarded that looks. This is just that was just the pump to June. So bear in mind that was the pump to June. So like when Bitcoin
That's
broke out,
2014.
no, this
Oh.
is 2014 into early
Mm-hmm.
2017.
Yep.
So this was like when we pumped. Like that looks retarded, right? You're like, wow, that's like no way. I shouldn't buy that, right? I
That's
should.
only the pump
Oh,
to 3,000. Wow.
just it looks ridiculous when you go back. Like, so I couldn't imagine like if I was seriously in Bitcoin then and being a chart guy and seeing this, like the
In
slow build up.
2015.
Yeah,
Oh
in
my God.
2015 and 2016, just like waiting. You're building up to it, and you're like, oh, and then just completely demolishing that. Like, I get it now. Parabolic. That's all. It's all you
Oh,
need to know.
oh, for sure. And for anybody who's just listening to this and they can't see the screen, or they're not watching on YouTube, you can Google the different Bitcoin bubbles and hype cycles, and pretty much what we're showing here is the parabolic moves look exactly the same every single time. You see these big parabolic moves with a blow off, and then we come crashing down.
Oh,
Anywhere between
this is like a
93% and 70%. I mean, you're this is it's going to continue like this,
yeah,
on and
no,
on.
it looks ridiculous when you do it. Like this is where it gets ridiculous right here. It's just like, boom.
Yep, I remember 3000 very well, and I was
Oh, I
thinking to
remember that. It
myself,
was like,
I
wow.
remember 1800 actually, thinking to myself, 1800 getting to all time highs. I can't believe it. Like how overvalued. And then you know, you 10x from there, and then it starts to
We,
stuff stops making sense. Uh,
I think we
you know,
talked about all the times where we bought like you'd buy altcoins like in summer of 2017 or the fall, and Bitcoin just kept marching, and your altcoins like even though they weren't losing dollars like in the USD, you were losing against Bitcoin the whole time.
yeah, you're losing satoshis.
Literally,
That's another thing. Yeah, people look at your charts relative to satoshis, so you
mhm,
actually know what's going on.
yeah. That yeah. If you're looking at altcoin charts in USD, not that it's not a good psychological thing, but your altcoins are all paired against Bitcoin. So that's what they trade against. That's what you want to look at the chart. Like literally Ripple, I'll show you an example. Like, and I was looking at this chart even, and this is like here again a discipline thing. I was looking at the Ripple chart when Ripple and Bitcoin, it literally peaked at the same point in Bitcoin. Like it was really obvious if you were in Bitcoin, like okay, Ripple peaked again, time to sell. Like in January, that first week of January, it was obvious. It's at whatever amount of sats, 23,000 sats or whatever it was. It was pretty obvious, you know.
Yeah, when you look at this Ripple BTC chart, you're pretty much seeing one, two, three or four different just complete pump and dumps with 90+% drops
Dude,
in the span of like
the best one
18
was
months. It's
was
insane.
in September where Ripple went from like 25 to 75 cents. I was like, wow. I knew like 25 cents was a spot to buy at, and I wasn't thinking about it. And then Ripple started moving, and then it went to 75 cents, and I was like, shit. And one of my buddies was bag holding it, and I was like, I told him like, yo, I told him set a sell limit order, just sell it at like set a limit order like 69 cents, and that heading like 75, 76. But I told him I was like, yo, this is your time to get out. I don't think it's
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people who might be upside down in their Ripple bags who are looking for that pump to get out.
well he
And
he
I
had
think
he had a pretty
that's
low entry.
common on other
He had a
alts
low
too.
entry below like 20 cents, so it's not like
I see, I see.
yeah. So
You want to? What do you think? Should we talk about some of these BTC targets?
yeah, we should go to BTC targets. Let's get we should talk about the short-term BTC targets. I think that's a good thing to start off with here. I think 3,000's gonna happen. We got close. We got down to 3,200 basically, 3,250. Um, I think 3,000 is definitely a psych barrier. It was where we bottomed out last year with the Jamie Dimon FUD and the China FUD. I remember buying that dip and never being happier in my life. Like I bought a bunch of shit coins, and they all within like I remember I fucking stayed up. It was like a Thursday into Friday morning. I stayed up, through the night, bought them at 6 a.m. And I was like, well, I couldn't get back to bed, so I was at the gym in the morning, and like I checked my fucking like Delta app and everything, or I think it was like Blockfolio, and everything was up, and I was just so ecstatic. It was like so ecstatic that everything bounced. So I think 3,000 is a possibility. There's also the 2017 summer low of like basically 1,800. That's another level. I think that's a low of low. I think that'd be if we were really gonna go low. I think anything below that's pretty scary. I think testing 1,000 or whatever, 1163 from the former top is a very scary level to test. That's a lot of more bleeding. That's like 75% down from here. Um,
Right. Yeah, that would
yeah,
be super scary for a lot of people, especially some of the newcomers to see Bitcoin just
yeah.
really look like
I
it's falling off the cliff.
my bet is the 3,000. We bounce at 3,000 or the 1,800. If we break through 3,000, then the 1,800 low should be, but I could be wrong. That's just my speculation. Um, I mean, when I look at
Oh, absolutely.
the anything below a day time frame doesn't look that bad, but when you look at like the 1 week, it doesn't look too pretty. The 2 week does not look pretty at
Yeah.
all. Like if I looked at if you look at the 2 week, you're like, wow, there could be good amount of bleeding left. And then you look at the monthly. Monthly, it's not even like a question. Monthly's pretty bad looking right now. And that's why even the fucking, 1,000 target or 1,100 target really could reasonably be in there. You look at the monthly, it does not. It just doesn't.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, look
It's
at that.
totally,
Look at this
yeah,
fucking.
it's completely in play. 1,000 is in play, 1,800's in play. Uh, the thing you got to remember is finite supply. You have OG holders who will absolutely be stepping in to buy cheap Bitcoin.
Oh
It's
yeah, no, there's.
at every price level, at every target. I mean, you can look at the order book right now and see that how many orders of like 1,000 Bitcoin are open for 3,000
Oh
limit
yeah,
orders. I
I'm
mean,
sure there's
there's
there's gonna be a
so many.
giant buy wall at 3,000.
Exactly, and
There's just a
there's going to be
just a
buy
psych
walls
level.
the whole way down. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, that, and now that we are dropping, I think a lot of people who haven't been buying in the last year or so are watching the market come back to reality and are getting their fiat ready to start stacking satoshis.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and I'm not a great predictor of long-term targets. Like if you want to go more in depth about that, my thoughts right now are just the short term. Where are we gonna bounce? Um, and long term, shit, anything's possible with a finite
Yeah,
supply.
for
Considering that
sure.
you're valuing them in an inflationary currency, and what people don't realize
Right.
is Bitcoin is simply it's not Bitcoin that's losing value or gaining value. It's really the dollar that's losing value, and that's the way people got to look at it. Like you
Right.
should,
Bitcoin stays consistent. It's, one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin. And that volatility you see, somebody said this and it made a lot of sense, is the volatility in Bitcoin is just the macro world volatility, like moving its way into Bitcoin in one way or another. And I didn't think about that because, one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin and it's a fixed supply. Um, but let's talk about those long-term targets. Everything that we try to talk about on this podcast, the macro, the technical, the shit posting, the memes, everything's going on this assumption of Bitcoin or something like it being global money within the decades to come. So with that being said, what's that long term target? And while I have no idea, I've been really fascinated by Mustab Murad's targets on Bitcoin, and basically his thoughts are, money's going to be one thing. It's a winner take all
yeah.
type of scenario. And, his price target is astronomically high. And it's so high that it's really easy to dismiss. And
What is it?
it's 10 million per Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's
And it sounds absolutely insane. But when you walk through his investment thesis, and that's what I'm going to do right now, you can start to see how he backs into that math.
hmm
So, his thoughts are around the total market cap of Bitcoin could be between 100 and 200 trillion. And he likes to sit on that $160 trillion mark. Yeah, if you want to bring up that on his Twitter,
yeah. I'm
that
gonna
that post about like the adoption of something becoming global money. So he likes to sit on that $160 trillion mark, which is, that gets you right around 10 million per Bitcoin. And he starts off by explaining how, the total market cap for money is, the formula would be something like store of value plus medium of exchange.
hmm
And there's an old Jewish proverb that says, you should keep a third of your wealth in land, a third of your wealth in your business, and then a third of your wealth in gold, or in this case, money vis-a-vis Bitcoin. And that it's a 95% winner take all market for global money. So here's how he gets there. So if you look at the total market cap for monetary metals, for gold as an example, it's around 8 trillion, and $8 trillion market cap of Bitcoin would be equivalent to around $375,000 per Bitcoin. So you take that and then you say, okay, well, all you have physical money, right, which is around $43 trillion market cap, and the equivalent of $43 trillion market cap of physical money gives you a Bitcoin price of around 2 million. And then if you were to measure the total market cap of all of fiat, which is around 100 trillion, that brings you to a market cap of Bitcoin, a market price of Bitcoin is around $4.5 million per Bitcoin. And then the last thing is real estate. That's a $200 trillion market. So if you go back to our assumption that the total market cap for money is your store of value plus the medium of exchange, the question you really have to ask yourself is how much of the real estate market, if those investors had a choice otherwise to hold that wealth in gold rather than to store it in real estate, would they choose to do that? Right. So, what percentage of a $200 trillion market would have invested in Bitcoin, assuming it's global money, otherwise, rather than putting that money into real estate? And I think that's the X factor. You know, I can see, okay, Bitcoin eclipses gold. It takes up to all of fiat. That gets you to 100 trillion. Okay, I can work with that mentally if Bitcoin takes up 95% of all global money. But it's that real estate part. I mean, I just sold my house at the beginning of this year, and I was using it as a store of value. You have, Chinese billionaires storing their wealth in multi-million dollar apartments in New York City or San Francisco, buying humongous buildings. Would they hold that money in cash if they knew that their money wasn't going to inflate? I don't know. That's a question I ask you. What do you think?
That's a good question. Obviously, the wealthy people, most of them are obviously pretty smart, and they get the idea of making your money work for you, and they understand how money is today, where you're losing holding it just in holding in dollars, unless you got some kind of high interest rate, whether you're lending it out or savings account, um, you're losing money. It's simple as that. You're losing 2% plus your money a year, if not more. And we're like, oh, it's not a big deal, but when you're talking millions of dollars, it really eats away at your value, and that's why you get a lot of people, business people, are always trying to make their dollars work for them, and instead of vice versa, instead of working for dollars, they're trying to get their money to work for them. Um, Real estate's a good example, but here again, we're in such a speculative time of real estate, and we're seeing, I'm sure you've seen in San Francisco, home prices are just coming down like a rock. Um,
Yep.
and it's and here we are at the end of a cycle again, and that's the hardest thing about predicting where Bitcoin comes into our in our lives and how it affects us, is because we're at such a unique time, as I said earlier. Like, we're at the end of a giant cycle from quantitative easing to quantitative tightening. That's going to have effects that we've never seen before. Central banks just fucked around with money, and now it's going to have detrimental effects. We're at a time where U.S. hegemony is slowly coming to an end. China's pushing those buttons. They're trying to figure out ways around. China's slowly. I think China's going to surpass U.S. GDP this year. And when you look in the past, when you look at World War One, that's what happened. Germany surpassed Britain's GDP, and within a few years they were at war. And so there's a lot of variables we have no clue they're going to come into play. Whether it's another global war, whether most likely we're going to see a very big recession coming up very shortly here. I think the next 2 years are going to be really bad. And here again, it's gonna be led by the equity markets like it always is. The markets are pricing it in right now. And we're going to see pensions take the hit. We're going to see endowments take the hit. You're going to see it take the hit across the board. Um, where this takes us, I don't know. I personally think, and I've discussed this with one of my buddies he's a finance guy. He's very smart. Um, we discussed, and some of his friends have too, another world war, the 21st century's, world war. We thought we're done with world wars. We thought we've made it, and now we have all these alliances, and where you look at NATO, where you look at BRIC nations, there's a lot of different alliances that tangle countries in, and it could have a very devastating effect, if there were a conflict to break out between two larger nations. Um, and there's my very pessimistic view of the next few years. Um,
For sure. For
um,
sure. Yeah. I mean, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and that's something you got to keep in mind with Bitcoin. I have the inverted chart of Bitcoin, so this is what your dollar is losing the value here. That's inverted chart. Um, that's really what's going on. But here again, I think this year, even as we discussed last podcast, cash has been king this year. If you've been in cash, it's definitely helped you out. Like, I think we've seen I've seen, at least on like crypto Twitter, people just washing out because they've been holding bags for months, and then the past few weeks haven't helped either because they're already underwater bags have just went more underwater. So here again, it just comes to risk management. Well, whether you're investing, trading, you name it.
Oh, absolutely. And I think you make a really good point about the potential for another war, and it goes really along with the narrative of Bitcoin that if you want to opt out, don't forget that a lot of these wars are funded with with
Fiats.
taxpayer dollars.
Oh yeah.
So right, exactly. So if you want to choose to opt out, and that's what's so nice about Bitcoin is it's completely voluntary. It's your choice. If you want to opt out, if you want to take that fiat and get yourself some Bitcoin, that's your choice. And I don't I wouldn't say I recommend doing it. I personally do it, and I think that is my hedge against
System
all
breakdown.
of just total system breakdown, right? Because if we're in a recession right now today, but we can't say it for a fact because we won't know until hindsight will let us know whether or not we were right or wrong. But if all markets are essentially inflated and bubbling up, you have two options. You can either go into cash, right? Or you look for something else that you can store your wealth in. And for some people, there's only a couple things. It looks like real estate is no longer that something that you can store your wealth in. You're seeing real estate markets start to drop in many of the hottest markets of last year and this year are now starting to cool off. And then you have your monetary metals, right? So gold is starting to pump. That makes sense. I can understand why it would. And then you have the black sheep of all of them, which is Bitcoin.
Yeah.
It's absolutely not pumping right now, which makes sense. It's highly speculative. This is a market of asymmetric information. I am much more bullish on Bitcoin than 99.5% of the rest of the
I would
population,
say you're
just
both.
because, yeah, just because I understand enough about it. I definitely don't. Nobody really understands Bitcoin, but I understand enough to that I believe in its monetary policy. There's going to be 21 million. There's not going to be any more. It's very difficult to change. It's something that I'm comfortable storing my wealth in, but
Yeah.
not everybody is. So I can look at this opportunity and say, oh, cheap Bitcoin. We're going into a recession. I have no issues taking 5% of my salary or income and putting it into Bitcoin on a biweekly basis. I have no issues with that. I do think, however, that many other people would. And the narrative of potential war, hyperinflation in other countries, the EU breaking down, I wonder if that Bitcoin narrative doesn't start to look better for the 99.5% of people who don't think like me in this circumstance.
And I think the Bitcoin narrative will look better as we see systemic risk across governments. We're seeing it, obviously in Europe right now more than ever. And I keep mentioning it because it shocks me how little coverage and how many people over here are not talking about how big these Paris riots are. This is like the city of love or whatever, and I mean they are uprising. They want revolution over. The narrative's been, oh, this is about gas taxes whatever because Macron wanted to increase gas and diesel prices via taxation to save the environment, which is a load of hogwash because and now it's more than just that. This is anti-Macron. They want the guy out. As I said, more than three-quarters of the country has disapproved of him. The dude hasn't made a public statement in over a week, probably 2 weeks now. I think it was like November 27th or something. And literally his whole country's burning. They're burning cars. They're destroying shops. They're coming to a complete economic halt in that country. That's going to have effects not just in France. It's going to have effects that are going to ripple through the EU, and it's not just going to be there. You're going to see it, go abroad too. There was even yellow vest protests in like Canada. Apparently, they weren't, as violent, but they're going on. I have a chart up right now. It's the General Electric chart, formerly America's largest company at one point in history, and it's now at $60 billion market cap. But General Electric, you look at this chart and you're thinking, fuck, this thing's going to zero. When I look at this chart,
Yeah.
like, okay, theoretically, it will bounce at the 573 low of 2009, but this thing doesn't look. There's nothing bullish about this chart. Nothing. I mean, this
No.
is monthly bars, and just looking at it, I mean, most likely this company will go to zero. They're gonna have to sell off their assets. GE still has good products. They still make like engines, electric trains, whatever you name it. Those will be sold off. But this company has so much debt and so many issues here. Here again is what I'm talking about. There's a lot of things people aren't really looking at and be like, yo, this is kind of a big deal. This is like a big company in America that's now only $60 billion, and it was probably at $30 a share is probably a $300 billion company. So we're just seeing it decimated. And I doubt this holds here. If that doesn't hold, you can say goodbye.
So I have a question for you. Let's say GE goes bust. Do we see bailouts again? Does that happen?
That's a good question. I don't think the American taxpayer will allow it to happen this time. I really don't.
I agree.
Last time it happened, it kind of just got snuck in. And I was watching. I think I told you I was watching the Too Big to Fail, which is a great movie if you get a chance to watch it. And it just talks about what happened with the banking crisis and how they basically saved the economy at the time because everything was going to go under. AIG, Goldman Sachs, and this was after the fact that Lehman Brothers had gone under, Washington Mutual is going under, and so they saved the economy there. But really, in reality, what it did was kick the can down the road, and so now the pain that was the pain we were supposed to have is going to be much worse. And we're seeing it here. Even Apple's I'll see exactly how high it's, but it's in bear market territory now. It's 28% off its highs. You know, and that the chart at Apple's chart doesn't look pretty at all. It does not look like it's going to be a. I mean, it in a matter of 3 months. Not even we're not even partway through December. We're a third of the way through December. Um, it's going to get bloody very shortly, and it already is. Nobody's really accepting it, but it is. None of these charts, and I'm on monthly bars right now. I'm just looking at monthly bars. None of them look good. None of them look good. And whether we bounce here and rally through the near, it doesn't matter. Reality's setting in on a lot of these. Reality's setting in the market really, and as Stock Cats on Twitter says, dumping on retail's head is not a 1 day event. It's a process. It takes a while. And there's a great chart of the smart money index, and smart money's been exiting all year. It's been its lowest point. Even below the 2000, the dot-com boom, and below the 2008 financial crisis. And so the dumping on retail's head has been going on all year. You see CNBC selling the market to people, telling them we're going to go new highs. No, there's not going to be no new highs. I don't know. I'm not a perfect chart analyst, but I can tell you, looking at some of these charts, we're not seeing new highs anytime soon. You know, um, so just be prepared for the worst is all I can say, and know what to expect.
Yeah, with that, I think the only advice I have is my two favorite pieces of advice to give, which are eat meat and buy Bitcoin
Yeah,
in this case, because nothing else is going to save you.
yeah, and as other traders have mentioned, cash is a position. Cash is probably one of the best positions in trading. It gives you the most power, most flexibility. As we saw people who got locked in shitcoins, the guys who were in cash did fine in 2018. They were able to move around the market, enter positions when they wanted to, but being stuck in shitcoins, being stuck in underwater stocks, not your best friend. And I'm not. This isn't financial advice by any means, but I'm just telling you what I see. You know, and like when you look at Netflix, Netflix's parabolic movement has completely ended. It's now on the backside, and as we saw with crypto, the backside's very bloody and it happens quick and it happens a lot faster than you think. You know, that's that. That there's my again. I'm throwing a lot of pessimistic views at people, and some people don't want to hear it, but that's the reality of what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, it can certainly get really bloody out there for every asset class. No
Yeah.
asset class is safe, I think is the
Yeah,
best
no,
way I can put
there's
it.
nowhere to hide right now, and that's what happens after a decade of manipulation, as I've mentioned before. When you have quantitative easing, you have lower negative interest rates, and then the biggest thing by far, and I mentioned this in the last podcast, share buybacks. I mean, when you think about share buybacks, these companies are buying back billions of shares, and we're on record. I think we're set a record this year already, and we're not even done with the year with the amount of shares been bought back. And what that does is basically think about just having a giant buy wall. So when people are dumping their shares, there's someone there to buy it no matter what. So the price isn't dropping. And you look at companies like GE's been a great example. GE was buying billions of dollars worth of shares back at $30, at $20. Now their share price is $7. How do you explain that to your investors? Take on debt to buy shares that are now worth a quarter of their value. Um, Bitcoin's time to shine is coming here very shortly. If we do see a bounce or it does hold, the 1800 or 3000 level, there could be a time to shine. And there's no way to really price it in properly. Is its technology worth it being worth $20,000 a Bitcoin or 5,000? I couldn't tell you, or 100. That's for the market to price in. But I think, the whole idea of hyper Bitcoinization, there's a lot of smart people who talk about it, and I don't disagree with it, in some sense.
Yeah, for sure, because it's a tough topic to talk about because it's very pie in the sky. But
Yeah.
the thing that I've kind of been reverting back to is it's either going to be hyper Bitcoinization or it's not, or it's going to be nothing. It'll just be a collectible as its investment thesis, and I have no idea how much that would be worth in market cap, but I don't foresee that happening. I think the genie's out of the bottle. We figured out how to solve the double spend problem. We have a workable digital cash right now. It works. It's decentralized. Can't really be stopped in any way. The security model's really sound. So it's either going to get adopted globally or it's not.
Yeah.
And I'd like to think that it will get adopted globally.
Yeah.
That would make sense to me. I would like that very much. Selfishly, but I think the rest of the planet's going to need something eventually because it could get messy out there.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are in that binary boat, and I am too. It's either everything, it's all or nothing, and it's hard mindset to, you know, is Bitcoin going to win, or is it going to be gold as the next reserve currency? The dollar's on the way out, and you can even see with like Trump's policies are more nationalistic, more U.S. Based, and is it going to be gold? Is it going to be a dollar? Who knows? You can't argue against the fact that gold's been a currency or money for 5,000 years. At the end of the day, that's what's been money for 5,000 years, and we're seeing all these countries like Russia and China have just been adding astronomically to their level since the '08 financial crisis. You're seeing Turkey, Hungary, you name it. Everyone's repatriating the gold. Venezuela was trying to repatriate the gold. I think we mentioned last podcast, and the Bank of England was holding their gold against them. And so here again, not your keys, not your Bitcoin, and same thing. If you're not holding your gold and someone else is holding it, or someone else is holding your dollars, someone else is holding your cash in a bank, it's not really your cash. The bank is using fractional reserve lending, so God knows how much they actually have of your money there. So if there's a bank run, bear that in mind.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And that's, I have two thoughts on that. One would be the not your keys, not your Bitcoin. I think that would be if we see more bank runs or people not being able to access their funds, you're gonna see the need for that node in a box, right? So that's something that you can keep your bank in your home if you want to, if that's something that you're comfortable with. I think that will help drive adoption for Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
But also, the thoughts of that gold was the world's currency chosen freely on the market. I'd like to add for 5,000 years, and I saw Safety talking about this, that gold has a really good head start in front of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
It has a very solid monetary history. The only thing that I can think of, and I heard Eric Voskuil say this during a presentation, was gold's great. It was an awesome money for a very, very long time, but it lost to fiat. It could not beat fiat. Money is a free market, and it works well with competition.
Yeah.
So fiat came in, it outcompeted gold because of the underlying security flaws in gold, right? You needed coinage and paper money as a layer 2 technology on top of gold, right? As your base layer. And all that tells us is that leads to rehypothecation and inflating the money supply, and then it goes bust. So while I don't want to hate on gold too much because it was a good money for so long. We already know that gold does have its security flaws for being money because it's easy to inflate the supply because you need to use paper money or coinage on top of it. And I think it leaves the door open for Bitcoin to step in if Bitcoin competes in that way. It's definitely going to leave the door open.
Yeah, it's again, as we said, having gold has that long-term history versus Bitcoin, which is still very nascent and new. And it's hard to see. Again, there's so many things that could happen. Like even in the past few weeks, the scale of these protests in France, we have no clue what the face of the EU will be in the next 2 years. For all we know, EU just disintegrates. So we don't have a euro currency anymore. They all go back to their own native currencies. That could change the political landscape a lot. Another large-scale war. I mean, I think if France just completely overthrows their own leader here, that's going to have huge ripple effects. There's no way to ignore that. And whether that's good for Bitcoin, bad, you could argue both sides. You could argue it's good because Bitcoin is outside of that monetary system. It's its own, system. And so people, might find it as a safety asset, where they put 1% of their net worth in it because they're like, well, hell, I might as well have 1,000 Satoshis. There's a lot going on right now. And if you're paying attention and not stuck into Netflix too much, you'll see what's happening. We're on the cusp of something big. I keep telling people, like, what's going on right now is not normal. Whether you look at the crypto bubble of last year, whether you look at equities and everything else being embarrassed, like I saw, it was like 89% of assets are down against the U.S. dollar in 2018. That's never happened in history. Not in 1929, not in 1987, not in 2000, not even in 2008. So what's going on right now is really big. Everything's finally being priced in properly because we're done with quantitative easing in the U.S. and we're going to quantitative tightening. So money's being taken out of the system. So it's having its effects.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's tough to talk about, a lot of this macro, global and political stuff because it's very sensitive, but it's becoming harder to dismiss. And I think in hindsight, somebody's going to make a really dope infographic of like key turning points, from 2000 or from the year 2000 to 2040 or 2050. And I have a feeling that what's going on right now will certainly be a key talking point as to how the globe started kind of going in a complete other direction. And it'll look obvious in hindsight.
Yeah,
but it's really hard to look at it now.
Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin again here. I think in the short term, there's definitely some blood. There's still a little more blood to be bled. But I think we're getting close. I mean, capitulation-wise, we're getting close. And so that's good for us. I would love to see it bottom out because that would give me more hope. And I mean hope in the sense that I'm not going to be buying Bitcoin at 3,000 and, having it go to 1,800 on me. So I'm a very patient person now. I will wait for myself to kind of find a bottom and then slowly start entering again.
Definitely. Yeah. If anything, this market has taught me a lot about myself and patience. So
patience is huge.
Yeah. If you don't have it, start working on it because you're going to need it. Yep. I mean, it's the same thing. People talk about buying Bitcoin so they can take advantage of the real estate market in a couple of years when it really cools off. And, you're going to see a lot of people doing that are sitting on cash, whatever the asset, they're sitting in something really liquid. And they're just waiting to deploy that capital when everything goes on sale. And it's coming soon to a city near you for sure.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to cover?
No, I think that's it. I think this was a good episode. We had a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to put a bunch of links in the show notes. We'll get everything out there. We'll put this on YouTube. We're working on getting this onto Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all those other your favorite podcast catchers. So shoot us a DM or
too.
Yeah, SoundCloud. Shoot us a DM and tell us what your favorite podcast catcher is. If you have a favorite app that you like to listen to get your podcast, just let us know. We want to try to take care of as many people as we can out there. But until then, everything will be on YouTube, and I'll have that link on our page. So to end it out, follow us on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. You can follow me at Crypto Humor at all 3 of those locations.
And for me on Instagram, it's crypto_coitus, COITAS. And on Twitter, it is Brett_coitus. Yeah, I try to post a lot of information, so feel free to follow me. I cover broad spectrum stuff, mainly markets, finance, but crypto is obviously included. Thank you guys. Have a good day.
Thanks a lot, everybody.